Chimney sweeps of old London. A grubby man reached into a smokestack at Tennant's Chemical Works, London, one August day in 1817. The hot stack reeked with chemical fumes. His grubby arm drew out a small bundle and threw it on the ground. "The young devil's foxing," he said, grinning at bystanders. He lashed the bundle savagely with a cane. It twitched and jerked, then lay still. 7-year-old Thomas Price, the bundle, had impudently contradicted the grubby man by dying. The master sweep who pushed apprentice Price into the suffocating chimney and beat him to death when he dared to collapse was transported to Australia for 10 years. His crime resulted in another outburst of protest against one of the most atrocious iniquities that ever stained the early industrial history of Britain, the employment of unwanted boys as human brushes to sweep the tortuous chimneys of the great. For 100 years the campaign had been raging. Thousands of others, grown too old, had been launched on the world as shambling cripples to die young. More were to die over the next 50 years before a handful of philanthropists softened the heart of the Parliament to the point where this martyrdom of innocence was banned. It was a nasty job. No respectable parent would indenture his son to a sweep. The apprentice shortage was such that sweeps paid to take children off the hands of unloving guardians and mothers. Master sweeps bought them from workhouses and baby farms. The smaller the boy, the higher the price. Little boys fitted little flues. A 5-year-old lost his value as he grew. First to take up the battle for the boys was an eccentric bachelor, Jonas Hanway, who had made a fortune in Russia. Hanway, who introduced the umbrella to England, first noticed the plight of the boys one Sunday in Hyde Park. Because it softened the skin, sweeps were reluctant to let their boys bathe. Some banned it altogether. Others allowed them to bathe once a week in the Serpentine. To make sure they did not wash too much, the master sweeps went along too. Hanway happened to be passing one day when he saw the sweeps dipping the wretched boys in the lake. He went along frequently, gave the boys sweets, and learned something of their plight. Indignantly he wrote, "A sentimental history of chimney sweepers. Some native races roast their children for food," he thundered, "but they certainly kill them first." This referred to the sweeps' habit of pushing boys up burning chimneys to put out red-hot soot. They charged a special fee of 5 shillings because of the extreme danger to the boy. Most boys survived the ordeal. In a few weeks their burns healed, making them tougher than ever and therefore more valuable. Hanway campaigned for boots for climbing boys, leather knee protectors, and provision for religious education. His proposals to ban notorious sweeps from work brought showers of garbage hurtling against his umbrella. His constant campaigning resulted in a law barring employment of apprentices under the age of 8. Neither magistrates nor master sweeps respected it, and 5-year-olds continued to be sold into sooty slavery. Hanway had every reason to be appalled at the fate of the hapless urchins. To induce them into chimney climbing, their repulsive masters stood them on the shoulders of bigger little boys, and stuck pins into their bare feet, till in desperation they struggled up the chimney and showed their heads out of the chimney pot as evidence of a clean sweep. When clothing caused a boy to stick in a small flue, he was expected to retreat and strip naked, due warning being first given by the modest sweep to any tender woman who might be watching the proceedings. If new boys crouched above the fireplace, refused to go higher, a heap of straw was ignited beneath their feet. A few such urgings, combined with whippings and short rations, quickly induced them to scurry up and down like veterans. They climbed by pressing knees against rough protuberances thoughtfully left by chimney builders. After a time these dislodged their kneecaps, and they limped like cripples. Mere deformity, however, did not release them from the agonies of flue climbing. At first many new boys wept with the pain of cuts and abrasions as they bumped and scraped up the black chimneys. Their loving masters toughened them by rubbing wounds with salt and sitting the stinging boys before a hot fire. In time the young skins became covered with leathery calluses, and they wept no more. Water alone softened the calluses. It was for this reason the master sweeps kept a strict eye on washing. One young witness told the committee he had not been allowed to wash for 5 years. The lucky ones were dipped in the Serpentine, where some showed rank ingratitude to their masters by committing suicide by drowning. When Hanway died, Michael Took, an historian, took up the campaign and founded the Society for Superseding the Necessity of Climbing Boys. It publicised a patent-jointed brush which it claimed would do away with the need for boys. Master sweeps chosen by the Parliamentary Committee to test the scandoscope in 1809 reported it to be a total failure. They neglected to reveal that they had jumped on the handles to break them and stuffed cloth down the House of Commons chimneys to block the machine's progress. They stressed that it refused to go around corners into horizontal flues as boys could. The boys themselves knew how difficult these flues were to clean, for careless urchins were frequently smothered in the soot collected there. Took campaigned for compulsory building of doors in horizontal flues and was told by a committee that the cost would be ruinous to householders. Took enlisted the support of William Wilberforce, whose struggles to end slavery had brought a welter of criticism. Together they aimed to raise the legal age of climbing boys to 16 and to force householders to alter chimneys inaccessible by brush. The House of Commons branded the pair as madmen. Mr. F. M. Ominy, Member of Parliament, said all climbing boys were gay, cheerful and contented, ideal recruits for the Navy. Sir Joseph Yorke opined that it would be as stupid to prohibit chimney climbing as it would be to ban the flogging of disobedient sailor boys up masts with cat of nine tails. Mr. Ominy wound up by pointing out that, though some boys might suffer in chimneys, it was good enough for them, as many were children begotten by gentlemen in an improper manner. The House of Commons reluctantly passed the bill to the Peers, where Lord Lauderdale declared that in Ireland it was the custom to drag a roped goose through dirty chimneys, where its flapping wings neatly dislodged soot. The Lords protested against such cruelty to birds, but threw out the bill to save boys, despite a masterpiece of bad timing at Lothbury. There, while they debated, a Lothbury sweep sent a boy up a bake shop chimney where he got stuck. The sweep then sent another boy down the chimney, and he got stuck as well. The baker complained that they were holding up his baking. Builders were called to open the brickwork, where they found the two boys dead. Killing themselves in pairs availed the climbing boys nothing until 1834, when apprenticing boys under 10 were banned. Under the same law, apprentices had to give assurance to a magistrate that they had volunteered to enter the trade. Many lads succumbed to threats of whippings unless they gave the expected assurance. Charles Dickens denounced this in Oliver Twist. Another eccentric then entered the field, the Earl of Shaftesbury, whose laws prohibiting child labour in factories and mines had raised the ire of every employer. In 1840, the Peers, so tired of Shaftesbury's complaints that he had banned climbing boys under the age of 16, master sweeps promptly flouted the law. Soon afterwards, a 12-year-old boy stuck in an Edinburgh chimney. The sweep tied a rope to the boy and tugged it with a crowbar for a lever until the obstinate youth crashed down dead, nearly torn in two. The sweep was sentenced to 14 years' transportation. Shaftesbury nagged to have the age limit raised to 21, with jail for any sweep seen taking a boy on his rounds. A new committee, including Lord Beaumont, heard evidence. Imprudently, Shaftesbury produced a sweep, Peter Hall, who testified that Lord Beaumont's own Carlton Hall, designed by Beaumont, was a sweep's nightmare. 23 of its chimneys rose 60 feet, ran horizontally, dived 40 feet, then rose again. Under Beaumont's urgings, Hall had sent his own young sons into the maze. At his own expense, he kept a brickworker standing by in case the boys lost consciousness and fell into the soot beds placed at intervals along the horizontal flues. Hall recommended the installation of trapdoors in such flues at the cost of a few pounds. The Peers icily filed away Hall's statements and made no report. In 1863, Parson Charles Kingsley wrote his scathing The Water Babies, a fantasy of climbing boys transported to a cool, clean, flueless world. Storms of protest rose all over the country. William Wood, a wealthy philanthropist, induced Manchester sweeps to work only with brushes. Other cities followed, some refused. In 1867, a London master openly advertised Boys of the best size for all tunnels and chimneys. Shaftesbury's campaign received another boost in 1874 when a 10-year-old boy was burned alive in a flue at Gateshead. The Lords accepted Shaftesbury's measure, licensing sweeps as Hanway had suggested 100 years before, banning the employment of anyone under 21 and promising heavy penalties for all who broke the law. From that day, a great stain was removed from British history. The Chimneys had claimed their last victim.